One of my earliest memories of Doctor Who was the introduction of a striking new design of Dalek, known collectively as the New Dalek Paradigm, who went up against Matt Smith's 11th Doctor in the 2010 episode Victory of the Daleks. At merely 9 years of age, I was immediately captivated by not only the Daleks in general, but this iteration of them in particular. The whole feel of Series 5 was as fresh as the Daleks' new coat of paint, and this episode piqued my curiosity as I wondered what these visually impressive, more powerful Daleks were capable of, and how the Doctor would go about stopping them in the many exciting adventures that would surely come. Right? As it transpired, various controversies surrounding these Daleks meant that their time on the show was short-lived, with an unsatisfying lack of conclusion that's niggled away at me ever since they were swept under the rug in favour of the previous bronze design. However, the shadow they cast was a long one, as the paradigm continued to pop up in various places throughout the 2010s. So today we'll be taking a look at the legacy of these Daleks 13 years on and why they were ultimately sacked off from the programme. In the classic series of Doctor Who, the design of the Daleks was altered to varying degrees in almost every episode they appeared in. However, the bronze Daleks introduced in 2005 had remained the same for half a decade, so showrunner Stephen Moffat decided it was time for a redesign. Mark Gatiss was appointed to write the episode, and between the two of them devised the new Dalek Paradigm, consisting of the Orange Scientist, Blue Strategist, Red Drone, the elusive Yellow Eternal, the only one to feature black sensor globes, and White Supreme, which in the narrative were created using pure Dalek DNA from a progenitor device inadvertently activated by the Doctor in the year 1941.
They are 100% old-fashioned, pure Dalek genome. That's what the story is about. The last of the Daleks are trying to find their purest form.
It's no secret that their imposing size and garish colour schemes were based off the popular 1960s Peter Cushing Dalek movies that both Moffat and Gatiss were big fans of as kids.
I'm terribly fond of them, and there's something so gorgeously impressive about those big, bloody Daleks with their colourful liveries that kind of look like minis. You know, you can feel like you can get in one and drive one around.
Each Dalek featured a mysterious compartment at the rear end, which was intended to house alternate weapons that could be switched out in substitute of the gun and plunger. But to me, the most intriguing thing about these new Daleks was not even the design itself, but the introduction of this class system that designated each of them with these colour-coded ranks.
And they've all got sort of kind of different classes. There's a scientist, there's a drone, and the white one is the Supreme.
The presentation of the 5 ranks led to the misconception that the Daleks would all now be multicoloured, when in actuality an army of Daleks would consist of red drones, which perhaps could have been made clearer in the episode.
You're sort of saying this is the new team, and from this you could, I suppose, have a story that is entirely staffed with red Daleks.
Looking at them more as villainous characters rather than mindless killing machines, with the various voices provided by Nick Briggs being scary and imposing at the time, namely that of the terrifyingly deep Supreme.
Yes, you are inferior.
Despite the strategist having the more familiar, higher-pitched voice, it was the Supreme that spoke most of the time, leading many fans to assume that all Paradigm Daleks spoke in this deep, new tone. Bizarrely, this carried over to the character options toys, which all featured the Supreme's voice. Suffice to say, the Daleks promising their return at the end of the story had me completely hooked.
We will return! We will return!
The Doctor Who Confidential episode War Games immediately followed, giving fascinating behind-the-scenes insight into the inspiration behind the new design, colours and ranks. The previous Daleks were very industrial, as if bolted together by hand, but the Paradigm was smooth with sharp angles, which many used to their detriment, but it gave them a sleek and alien appearance, as if the casing was completely impenetrable. The clean edges of the design were intended to be sharp, with the structure housing the fleshy eye acting as blades that would cut someone's hand if they tried to grab it. Though, like most aspects of these Daleks, it never really came across in the final design.
Steve had a fantastic idea, which is here, of giving them a living eye, just to remind people that within this sort of tank there is this creature.
We find out Matt Smith's favourite of the new Daleks.
I think the blue one's my favourite.
With future teasers of what was to come from Stephen Moffat.
And someday, I bet you that Eternal will be really important in a future Doctor Who.
The month of April, in which the episode aired, still had plenty more Paradigm content, as from this point onwards, they were fully intended to just be the Daleks. The bronze counterparts were rarely seen at all, and any reference to the Daleks in books and magazines would feature these guys. Radio Times notably featured them as front cover variants, whilst 3 of the actual props were sent out to Sheffield railway station, and it's worth noting that they're instantly recognisable as Daleks to the general public, despite the design controversy. This appearance was to promote City of the Daleks, the first episode of Doctor Who The Adventure Games, which were free to play on the BBC website.
Download the Doctor Who Adventure Games from the 5th of June.
According to executive producer Piers Wenger, this story can be considered an additional episode of Series 5, assumedly taking place after Vincent and the Doctor, which is when the game released. I often wonder where my high expectations came from when it came to Doctor Who, and particularly Dalek stories, and I think I found the answer. In retrospect, this game was that huge, ambitious episode I was patiently waiting to see on screen for the next few years. It followed on from the events of Victory.
I'm always worried about the Daleks.
It'll take time though, won't it? I mean, there's still not many of them. They'll need a while to build themselves up.
And they've been busy rebuilding this place too.
Rebuilding?
Kalan. City of the Daleks.
Established the Paradigm Daleks as a huge threat at the height of their power as they rebuild Skaro, appoint an emperor, invade Earth in the year 1963, and attempt to seize control of time itself.
Witness the might of the Daleks!
Massive scope, you get to see the Paradigm doing the thing, with a sea of drones invading Earth before we see scientists and strategists on Skaro. It adds great depth, whilst the atmosphere is eerie at times and proves that these Daleks can absolutely still be scary.
Sylvia!
Exterminate!
Run, Doctor, run!
Exterminate!
And yet we never saw anything involving them on such an epic scale in the actual TV series. Going into the series finale, I was ecstatic to hear the various voices of the Daleks implied to be surrounding the Pandorica.
What kind of starships?
Maintaining orbit. On our way. Shield cover compromised.
Daleks. Those are Daleks.
Activity.
Having not long played City of the Daleks, this flowed perfectly, as now that they're fully established, you've presumably just got fleets of Daleks that we never properly see on TV. The Paradigm lead the alliance that imprisons the Doctor, with the Supreme, Eternal, and the Drone Dalek making an appearance.
Doctor.
The Supreme has a much higher voice here, so assumedly it's a different Supreme.
Ready for you.
But the real life explanation is that Nick Briggs heard his voice doing the previous one for Victory, which is a damn shame because it sounded amazing.
Then prepare.
The atmospheric lighting of the Underhenge allows for some amazing cinematography featuring the Daleks and highlights how great the props look when they're not in a white, brightly lit room. Following the dramatic cliffhanger, I recall the next week feeling like a month, but when the Big Bang finally came along, we got 2 stone Daleks as petrified after images. The individual that is revived in the museum and eventually killed by River Song is believed to be the Red Drone due to the voice matching neither Eternal or Supreme. but in reality this was the blue strategist prop, with the other being the orange scientist in a layer of stone, as they were the only props left available. And when time rewinds at the end of the episode, we see archive footage of the Stone Dalek and the Supreme in victory. So in Series 5 of Doctor Who, we had a total of 3 TV episodes featuring the Paradigm, and 1 tie-in video game within the space of 3 months. This was enough to ignite my imagination with potential stories, and luckily for 9-year-old me, merchandise was round the corner.
Exterminate and save planet Earth from a new race of Daleks. Doctor Who action figures and accessories.
From character.
When I look back on my childhood and fondness of Doctor Who, these Daleks were always present in some capacity throughout Matt Smith's era. The marketability of the design allowed for loads of toys, with the variant colours definitely appealing to younger fans, as I recall being determined to collect each and every one. However, there wasn't such a warm reception from some older fans of the show who despised the design, mocking the hunchback and bright colours, comparing them to, well, anything that was also brightly coloured, such as Teletubbies, Skittles and Mini Coopers. This was my first experience of negativity on the internet as a whole, in regards to something that I had nothing but joy and excitement for. Knowing that the majority of people online hated something that I loved was upsetting as a young kid, but the internet wasn't the be-all and end-all as it is now, so me and my brothers continued to watch the episode repeatedly, buy all the toys, and then make up these adventures and film the toys, play the games, and anticipate what was to come. Good times. In August, the Supreme Dalek appeared on the One Show alongside Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, before emerging on stage for Doctor Who at the Proms a month later, to rapturous applause from the audience, a far cry from the alleged reception online. He reaffirms the Paradigm's status as superior by ordering an Ironside to be exterminated, before ordering conductor Ben Foster to perform the Symphony of the Daleks in a comedic on-stage interaction. This is the original prop and features a voice more faithful to the Supreme in victory.
The more complicated it is, the more enjoyable it is. So the fact that there's the Ironside Daleks and the new master race of Daleks, that's quite exciting to do the two of them having a conversation.
In the graphic novel The Only Good Dalek, the Paradigm waged war on humanity in the 41st century. Several units were captured by the Space Security Service, who reconditioned one in particular to destroy other Daleks. The comic format allows for a great demonstration of the Paradigm in full force once more, with a slew of drones and then scientists and strategists taking on their respective roles, reinforcing these new Daleks as sinister, calculative, and a massive threat to humanity. The Supreme then made a guest appearance on morning TV show Daybreak, having a higher pitched voice once more as he's interviewed by the hosts in promotion of Doctor Who Live, a stage show that toured throughout October and November.
You're travelling all over the country. Are you looking forward to it?
We are looking forward to conquering the whole country. Everyone will be exterminated! Exterminated!
Got a lot of confidence, haven't they? A lot of confidence. Very lot of confidence.
Supreme!
The actual Eternal prop appeared at the premiere, but 5 near-identical replicas were constructed especially for the live shows, with the drone live prop featuring in a publicity interview with actor Nigel Planer.
In fact, we have a flying
This is the new design, isn't it?
Oh, the back does. It's like that Renault.
Yeah. That's it,
not
the
allowed to
McGann.
say that, you know, the one
I
with
just said it as well.
Like that, you know.
The plot follows Voganson, a travelling showman who uses a minimizer device to procure the Doctor's greatest enemies for his show. Towards the end, however, everything grinds to a halt as a Dalek drone emerges onto the stage and declares that the entire show was an elaborate orchestration to capture the Doctor.
Remain in your seats. The males, the females, the descendants. This auditorium is under total Dalek control.
I saw this in Manchester at the time and was genuinely terrified by the eerie and overpowering presence of the Daleks. As Voganson declares, "I am so sorry, ladies and gentlemen," before legging it from the stage. The drone acting as the standard Dalek was fantastic, and then it proceeds to introduce the rest of the paradigm by the Supreme.
You and these humans, behold the new Dalek Paradigm. Strategist, Dalek strategy 100% effective. Scientist, containment field is prepared for activation. And the eternal time parameters calculated and locked. A new future begins now.
All of them have prominent speaking roles that relate to their ranks, with each also having a unique voice. The drone is your standard Dalek.
Doctor!
The strategist is higher pitched as heard in Victory.
You came here to rescue Churchill and the humans.
The scientist's is this unique, lower and strained voice.
Compassion is your greatest weakness.
Whilst the Eternals is wonderfully intelligent and calculative.
Daleks have no such weakness.
The Doctor then unleashes the Cybermen, who put up a decent fight against the Daleks this time round.
Sorry lads, not today.
Thanks to their improved weapons in an explosive finale that sees both drawn into the minimizer after sustaining damage on both sides. Then, to top it all off, the Supreme appears levitating around the arena, which still looks phenomenal, and I don't know to this day how they pulled it off so well.
Hello? I wasn't expecting you.
He has his correct, deeper voice this time, and following his defeat, the show draws to a close. Carrying the flow of content through November, we got 2 video games in the form of Evacuation Earth for the Nintendo DS, which was pretty much a puzzle game. I didn't really like that one. And Return to Earth for the Wii, which was more in line with the adventure game format. We see the Supreme and some drones, but the Daleks are not voiced by Nick Briggs on this occasion.
Doctor, you will give us the time access.
Take it.
Exterminate!
The stories of both games are interconnected, so at the end of the Wii game, the Daleks travel back in time to when the DS game took place, which is in the Doctor's future. Not confusing at all. He ultimately leaves the Daleks stranded on the cusp of a black hole.
I've finished what I started all those years from now. You didn't think you'd manage to escape me that easily, did you?
Exterminate! Exterminate! TARDIS dematerializing!
10 light years, 50 light years, 1,000 light years, and whoops! Watch out for that black hole as you go de-interfaced. Goodbye, Daleks.
In December, The Mazes of Time released for iOS devices, which interestingly features a lone Dalek scientist as the main antagonist, which is exactly the kind of fascinating variety that the paradigm allowed for as recurrent villains. Eventually drawn to a Dalek ship, we see strategist and drone Daleks who are tricked and defeated by the Doctor as their ship hurtles towards the outer limits of the galaxy. In an interview with Digital Spy regarding the 2010 Christmas special, Matt Smith casually leans on the Dalek drone prop in a BBC storage facility, whilst the Eternal and 2 stone Daleks lurk in the background. To close out 2010, at Christmas the Supreme Dalek made a surprise appearance in an advertisement for the upcoming comedy series Come Fly With Me, starring Matt Lucas and David Walliams. In the comedic sketch, the Dalek books a flight to his home planet of Skaro for the festive season.
And where are you travelling to today, sir?
Skaro! Skaro? That's near Mykonos, isn't it? And here's your boarding pass, sir.
Next, please.
BBC One, everyone's home for Christmas.
Once again, he has a higher pitched voice, but it was little things like this that not only solidified Doctor Who and the Daleks as a household name, but made being a fan of the show exciting, as you never knew when they were going to pop up on your TV. "2011 kicked off with the Doctor Who Experience in London opening in February. Prior to the launch, the Dalek Eternal patrolled the streets of Kensington in promotion of the opening, before becoming part of the experience itself, as it represented the Paradigm in a Dalek timeline exhibit, which I was fortunate enough to see as a kid. The Eternal would join the other props in recreating the infamous Westminster Bridge scene in another promotional photoshoot later in the year. But the Paradigm played a much larger role in the interactive section of the experience, as guests were taken into a spacecraft with the beautifully designed set being made especially for the Paradigm. This was the closest we ever got to seeing these Daleks realised in their own environment. 3 additional props were made, being 2 drones and a Supreme, the booming voice of which shocked my younger brother into tears.
Begin the process. Scan the humans! Scan the humans!
Whilst one of the stone Dalek props, originally the Scientist, stood dormant beside the entrance. The plot features the unexplained return of the Time War Daleks, who, as the children of Davros, declare war on the Paradigm and the battle ensues. Despite being an interesting concept, similar to Remembrance of the Daleks, that would have been interesting to see televised, this contradicts what we saw in Victory, wherein the Daleks created by Davros wanted to be cleansed and replaced by the pure Paradigm. Between this, fleets of Time War Daleks popping out of thin air, and reused Dalek sec footage, it's hard to take this seriously as a canon event. However, it was almost certainly the first attempt to reintroduce the Bronze Daleks following the negative backlash of the Paradigm. The Doctor Who Monster Invasion trading card and magazine collection launched in April, with the cover for the first issue once again suggesting a war between the 2 factions of Dalek. Despite this, the Paradigm remained extremely prominent in promotional material for the series, featuring on the back of every card, with their own 3D cards that when scanned into the computer would produce a digital model of the Dalek on your webcam. The online game Dalek Supremacy launched on their website the following month, in which you play as a strategist Dalek leading a squadron of drones, tasked with exterminating the Silurians, Sontarans and Cybermen. The title screen is almost like an uncanny rendition of that used for the adventure games, with the same selection of 3 Paradigm Daleks, though another of these games released later in the year was titled The Keys of Time, and puzzlingly for me featured the bronze design. More saddening news hit the papers in May of 2011 as Stephen Moffat announced that the Daleks wouldn't appear in the upcoming 6th series. Quote, We thought it was about time to give them a rest. They are the most famous of the Doctor's adversaries and the most frequent, which means they are the most reliably defeatable enemies in the universe." End quote. This decision was no doubt reinforced by their many defeats in the expanded media that we've covered, whilst also allowing for the supposedly unpopular paradigm design to be quietly swept under the rug. Though it was the fans that kept the design alive, with The Dalek That Time Forgot by Lee Adams being a particularly impressive animation at the time, which carried on directly from the events of Victory and appeased my appetite for more paradigm content.
Drone, activate transmat. Bring him before me. Transmat engaged. Materializing now.
A short episode of Doctor Who Confidential featured Dalek operator Barnaby Edwards teaching a fan how to drive a Dalek, which happened to be the red drone apparently chosen to match his hair. Whilst Dalek operators allegedly found the larger and heavier props difficult to maneuver, which may have reinforced the decision to retire them. But despite Moffat's claims, a damaged Supreme Dalek would have a cameo appearance in the opening of the Series 6 finale, The Wedding of River Song.
Hello, Dalek. Emergency, emergency, weapon system disabled, emergency protocol.
And as cool of a scene as this is, it's the first time I recall being completely underwhelmed by the Daleks. The episode was a bit of a complicated mess with a lack of direction, and I could sense this at the age of 10. I wanted to know what was going on with the Daleks. We'd been shown this huge empire the Paradigm had built in expanded media, so why wasn't the Doctor doing anything about it in the TV series? And is it implied the Doctor destroyed this ship? I didn't really know, but it depicted the Daleks as weak and useless. As if that wasn't disappointing enough, I later discovered they completely wrecked the original Supreme Dalek prop, which is under rubble and in low lighting, for a scene that lasted mere seconds.
Hush now, I need some information from your data core. Everything the Daleks know about the silence.
And that was 2011. What a come down. The following year, in 2012, the 5 props used for Doctor Who Live were transported to Australia for use in the Doctor Who Symphonic Spectacular. As with the proms, the Supreme emerged and ordered conductor Ben Foster to play the Victory of the Dalek suite, this time conversing with a strategist positioned amongst the audience, which thundered with applause. Later joined by a scientist and the Eternal. A drone featured on screen only in a video message pre-recorded on location in Sydney.
Sydney is now under Dalek control. This building is surrounded. There is no escape from the Daleks.
Making good use of all 5 of the live props. Doctor Who The Eternity Clock released in May for the PS3. As with City of the Daleks, it featured the Paradigm invading Earth, specifically London, but this time in the year 2106. The voices are noticeably off in this game, as it's not Nick Briggs, as with the previous console game.
Non-Dalek temporal technology in use in this vicinity. Deploy drones. Deploy drones. Seek, locate, exterminate.
A squad of drones are led by a strategist which patrol the ruins of the city, but when the Doctor and River Song reach the Dalek flagship, we can see its design heavily resembles what we see in the Experience, with the striking eye stalk design looking down from the ceiling. It's here we see more strategists and a few scientists amongst the hordes of drones. Additionally, a Black Dome drone can be seen guarding the Emperor as a homage to the original Emperor's Guard Daleks, with this Paradigm variant never appearing before or since. The second Emperor to oversee the Paradigm had a peculiar design that allowed it to retract into a ball and levitate, whilst it was heavily armoured and purple. Yeah, I don't think adding further colours to the mix was the best decision, considering the comparisons being made at the time.
Is at an end. The Time Lords are known.
The Daleks used a piece of the titular Eternity Clock to time lock the area, technology they wished to perfect and use to time lock entire planets, becoming the new Lords of Time. The Doctor deactivates this, which erases their invasion from history, restoring the original timeline. So, it never really happened. The Doctor Who experience in London closed in February, but reopened at its more permanent location of Cardiff in July, with the Dalek Eternal from the Doctor Who live shows being present on opening day, before residing in the lobby of the experience for a while, alongside this life-size drone Dalek by character building, which is made up of 157,460 blocks that definitely aren't Lego, whilst the real Eternal prop was held inside, later to be joined by a stone Dalek, formerly the Orange Scientist. The Paradigm featured in Doctor Who Worlds in Time, an online RPG released in March of 2012 that's since been discontinued. Now, the opening episode of Series 7 was to be titled Asylum of the Daleks, and there was significant promotion in the lead up to its release in September. I was not only excited for the first proper Dalek story since Victory in 2010, 2 years was a very long time back then, but Doctor Who magazine promised that this time the Doctor must face every Dalek ever, with artwork depicting a variety of Dalek designs from the programme's 50-year history, all in the same space. As a kid, this was all very exciting until a trailer released in August that featured the Doctor in a giant room full of bronze Daleks, alongside the Paradigm Supreme, a strategist and a few drones, who, if you recall, previously obliterated their inferior counterparts. Now, Skaro was rebuilt, which felt like a rehash of City of the Daleks, but the first thing we see is a giant statue of a bronze Dalek. So it already feels like an alternate universe wherein the Paradigm never existed. Despite this, when the Doctor and Amy meet the Daleks, he tells her to
make them remember you,
which logically is referring to their off-screen encounters such as City of the Daleks, considering Amy never met the new Daleks in Victory. Additionally, the Dalek security cameras and eye stalks that protrude from their human puppets are of the Paradigm design, albeit with the blue light of the bronze Daleks in the case of the latter. So, mixed messages all around. At the age of 11, after anticipating the Daleks' big return ever since Series 5, I was not only confused, but felt completely betrayed. After years of setup, they just gave into the negativity and brought back the bronze Daleks. Additionally, it made no logical sense. The driving force of the narrative in Asylum is that the Daleks can't destroy other Daleks because
it is offensive to us to extinguish such divine hatred.
Despite this being a major plot point in Victory. Why did the Daleks have a parliament and a prime minister, and where was every Dalek ever? So many questions, so little answers. As it transpired, Stephen Moffat had revised his plans following the backlash and now considered the Paradigm to be an officer class of Dalek, whilst the bronze designs would act as drones. Though despite 8 new bronze Daleks being made for the episode, 5 additional Paradigm props were also constructed, with some quality of life improvements that addressed previous criticisms. The Daleks were said to look hunched, so the supposed weapons compartment at the rear was reduced in size, creating a sleeker design. The bright colours were constantly mocked, so the Supreme remained the same, but the Orange Scientist and Yellow Eternal disappeared completely, whilst the Strategist and Drone were given a deep, bloody gorgeous metallic finish. This is my favourite design of Dalek, and it went on to prominently feature on the episode's poster. It's just a shame that instead of charging ahead with this improved design and proving to the fans that yes, the Paradigm could be a serious threat by having them do something threatening, Moffat relented and just brought back the Bronze Daleks, then had them all beg for the Doctor's help. This once again made the Daleks seem pretty pathetic, and the bright lighting meant that the changes made to the Paradigm were barely noticeable on screen, and the Bronze Daleks simply felt out of place, with the newly made props not being given the attention to detail there had been in the RTD era, making them appear overly clean and plasticky. In the asylum itself, we saw two dormant Paradigm inmates, being the metallic blue strategist, stripped of its eye and lathered in dust, and the original Supreme Dalek prop that was battered up for the Wedding of River Song, now also missing its eye, which the Doctor took in that episode, so we can assume this is the same individual, which is some nice continuity for once. After its use in Asylum, one of the new metallic drone props stood in the reception area of Rothlock Studios in Cardiff for some time, and the two red drone props in the interactive section of the experience were given a repaint to reflect the new look in the episode. So one was painted metallic red and the other metallic blue, which looked brilliantly menacing in the dimly lit spacecraft, with strobe lights highlighting the glossy new finishes. From this point onwards, the revised metallic designs of the Paradigm were used in plenty of promotional material and merchandise, but at the same time the Bronze Daleks began to creep back into prominence. A notable example would be the spiritual successor to the Only Good Dalek graphic novel titled The Dalek Project, featuring Bronze Daleks alongside the 11th Doctor, which was pretty jarring. When the TARDIS interior was redesigned by Michael Pickwood and debuted in the 2012 Christmas special, The Snowmen, the roundels feature a familiar ring shape that you can't unsee once you've noticed it. These are Paradigm Dalek neck rings and were likely created from the same moulds, but there's definitely something ironic about the Doctor's ship being constructed from parts of his greatest enemy. 2013 was Doctor Who's 50th anniversary year, and the British Icon Dalek that was to be released in celebration used the Time War design. It was that moment that solidified to me that the Paradigm were no longer seen as the standard Daleks, but they did hang around for some time yet. At the read-through for Doctor Who's 50th anniversary epic, starring Matt Smith, David Tennant and John Hurt as the Doctor, we can see the Supreme and one of the drone props lurking behind the cast.
For a moment, all there is a terrible armada of Dalek ships and their dreadful energy beams hammering at the planet. But then other things are spinning among them, zooming closer to us. At first it's not clear what they are, and then gloriously it is. All the other TARDISes are flying towards the screen.
Far from a hint towards their inclusion in the episode, this was much more likely an indication that the props had nothing better to do than decorate the BBC staff rooms. Surprisingly, in May, what are presumably the same two props made an appearance on the BAFTA red carpet.
Hello and welcome to the Arkiva British Academy Television Awards, where tonight a galaxy of stars have gathered to celebrate the best of British telly, and the lucky few will be getting their hand on one of these beauties. Oh, gotta go, my security's arrived. Watch out.
Exterminate! Not tonight, guys, you're not coming in. No Daleks allowed.
Exterminate!
No, you're not coming in, not tonight. You're still not coming in, you're not allowed.
Accosting a host of celebrity guests in celebration of the anniversary.
I hope.
Dalek's poking you at the butt.
Dalek is abusing you live on E-World.
Getting on my nerves.
The redesigned props looked amazing out and about, with the drone looking particularly stunning as rain began to trickle down its metallic finish.
A truly unforgettable night. Loads of great guests, an amazing Dalek as well. So who will be victorious? Well, join me backstage when all the winners will be stepping off the stage with their shiny new masks and talking to me. Right, come on, let's go. Come on.
In July, an episode of Top Gear featured a motorcyclist racing through the recently abandoned BBC television centre, with him passing the same pair of Daleks half draped in white sheets.
Into the studio and the Daleks still waiting at the bottom of the stairs there.
Thankfully, both props were recovered at some point prior to the unfortunate demolition of the building in 2015. It was in their new home at Rothlock Studios in Cardiff that the three members of the Paradigm met their now King Charles and Queen Camilla. Doctor Who at the Proms in 2013 was also held in celebration of the 50th anniversary, and the Daleks had a similar routine to the 2010 Proms and Symphonic Spectacular. Though following the new class system introduced in Asylum, it was now two bronze Daleks that trundled on stage to hassle the conductor, as opposed to the Paradigm. But a metallic drone did emerge from a platform in the midst of the audience, acting as the Supreme typically would, with a deep voice to boot.
Orchestra, you are now all slaves of the Daleks. You will play special Dalek music. You will obey.
This is in no doubt to reflect its new officer class, but is confusing as it's just filling in the role of the Supreme. The music from Victory was removed and no footage was used of the original Paradigm, though they were added to PlayStation Home and Interactive Virtual Space as part of the Doctor Who pack.
So there's all these coloured Daleks. What are they called now?
They're called the new Paradigm Daleks.
Okay.
On the 23rd of November 2013, the day of the Doctor finally came. As the Dalek action in this episode was to take place during the Time War, it was only logical that the bronze props be used. But I always felt their appearance would have been much more meaningful and effective if these Daleks hadn't been on screen in a while, as would have been the case if they'd fully committed to using the Paradigm. Alas, as with some other forgotten characters, they weren't completely left out of the 50th celebrations. The Five-ish Doctors reboot was a comedy spoof released shortly after the Day of the Doctor, following former Doctors Peter Davison, Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy attempting to sneak onto the set of the anniversary special. After locking the Dalek operators in their room, the three actors hijack three corresponding Daleks, which happen to be the Supreme, Drone and Strategist, ironically providing some of the best footage we have of the new Paradigm props alongside each other.
Gentlemen, I think we've done it. We certainly have.
Brilliant! So, how do we get out?
After successfully performing as the Daleks in a scene for the 50th anniversary special, the Doctors are overjoyed but were later shown Stephen Moffat going over the footage and deciding that the scene is to be cut.
We are overrunning by 10 minutes.
Oh, eh? Great, let's cut it then.
It was always amusing that the classic Doctors used the Paradigm props, as they felt underappreciated in much the same way. Doctor Who Legacy was one of those crappy mobile games, and this is supposedly a Paradigm Dalek. Now that's an ugly design. Now it was time for Matt Smith's swan song, The Time of the Doctor, which was featured on the cover of the Radio Times, and look who it is, all beautifully draped in snow. Oh well, despite not having an episode of themselves for the duration of the 11th Doctor's era, at least they'd be present for the explosive finale. Right? Nope, just bronze Daleks, again, who we'd seen the episode prior in the Time War. For additional confusion, they're still supposed to be the current Dalek Paradigm, just in the bronze casings, and that massive ship above the clock tower is speculated to be the Dalek Parliament, therefore implying that the booming voice is that of the White Supreme.
You will die, and the Time Lords will never return.
So technically, the Paradigm are in the episode, just not seen. This would make the Supreme Dalek the final enemy that the 11th Doctor went up against before his explosive regeneration, which is poetic as he was also one of the first. At least it would have been if we actually saw the bloody thing. And hey, if you wanted to write out the Paradigm, have them here. These Daleks are intrinsically linked with Matt Smith's Doctor, so having them all be taken out by his final blast of regeneration energy would have been a fitting finale for both the 11th Doctor and the new Dalek Paradigm. But nope, that's That's not what happened, and it's all just a bit messy really. Following the end of the era that introduced them, the Paradigm surprisingly made the jump into 2014, though despite Peter Capaldi playing the new 12th Doctor, they were never once seen in the same space as far as I'm aware. In January, the Doctor Who Symphonic Spectacular returned to Australia with the Supreme Dalek taking centre stage, but this time alongside the metallic drone from the 2013 proms and a matching metallic strategist. You'd assume they'd have just repainted their original counterparts, but the red drone and yellow Eternal Life props have been seen since in their original state. We know the strategist is the same prop due to paint bleeds, so logically it was the orange scientist repainted to metallic red. Regardless, this marks the last proper appearance of the Paradigm in which they're the centre focus and actually do stuff. It's a good send-off too, as they look gorgeous and Nick Briggs carries over the voices originally designated to each rank in Doctor Who Live 4 years earlier.
Resist us and you will be exterminated! Orchestra, you are all now slaves of the Daleks. You will play special Dalek music. You will obey. Conductor, remain on that platform and stop overacting. Resist us and you will be exterminated.
Then came Series 8 of Doctor Who with Into the Dalek, bringing back the Daleks after about 1 episode's absence, and they were all just bronze. It's at this point that began to feel really stale and uninspired to me, as though the team were terrified to do anything different with them due to the backlash of the Paradigm design. Daleks are just there, we've lost all sense of overarching story by this point, and the whole thing feels like a rehash of Dalek from Series 1. I thought if Rusty was a Paradigm Dalek, he would have at least looked visually distinct. We see what is supposedly Dalek High Command, but there are 0 Paradigm Officer class Daleks, as Stephen Moffat had stated would be the case. In October, the 5 original members of the Paradigm were made available as skins in Minecraft. This was from more of a historical perspective and was no indication of them returning, but it was nice to see all 5 of them represented, with their own unique models compared to the standard Daleks. Later that month, the Doctor Who experience was refurbished to complement the 12th Doctor's era of the show. The 3 Paradigm Daleks in the interactive section actually remained, likely solely due to budgetary restrictions, as they were fitted to tracks and would have been expensive to replace. This time the set is dressed to depict Skaro as the Doctor lands there in the updated story. Therefore, the Daleks were heavily weathered to the point you could barely make out their original colour schemes, which was probably the idea. Stationary bronze Daleks were now amongst the Paradigm, contrary to the attraction's previous iteration wherein the 2 factions fought. Continuity, eh? Fast forward to March of 2015 and filming was underway for the Series 9 opener, which was very much another every Dalek ever situation. It's like Moffat had a midlife crisis at this point and just started saying, why not? It completely broke the canon, carried little to no narrative purpose, but presumably to make up for the disappointing lack of classic Daleks in Asylum, here was a cocktail of Dalek designs all in one room. All except one design. It's at this point I thought, okay, there's no chance of the Paradigm ever returning if they're making a point of having every Dalek design and not including them. As it transpired, a behind the scenes photo revealed that the original metallic drone and strategist props were actually present for filming, just outside the set, suggesting their use was decided against last minute. When a fan asked Stephen Moffat why this was the case, he responded, "You do see them about from time to time. It just became a little bit mad in The Magician's Apprentice because there was so many different Daleks in there and I didn't want to confuse the eye. They haven't gone away, we still have them." This was not the response I expected to hear at the time, as I was certain he would have confirmed the retirement of the props. Despite this statement, however, that had me hoping that one would pop up in a future episode, the Paradigm never did reappear, which was hardly surprising considering the dilapidated state of the props in 2015. as can be seen in this photo from director Rachel Talalay, in which mismatching parts of original and live props are thrown together in a corner. There's no reason the props should have been in such an awful state by this point. Then the Symphonic Spectacular debuted in the UK, and similarly to the Experience, was updated to focus on the 12th Doctor's era. As such, the performance was essentially reskinned, with standard bronze Daleks now in place of the Paradigm. I remember being slightly disappointed when I saw this after seeing footage from the Australia shows online that featured the Paradigm, but what do you expect when they're not actually appearing in the programme anymore? A cardboard cutout of the metallic drone appeared in The Big Bang Theory, which at the time would have been most of the viewers' first exposure to a Dalek. And then finally, after years of absence, a Paradigm Dalek featured on the official Doctor Who YouTube channel. Few things pissed me off as much as this did at the time. It was an advert for the Doctor Who festival, which the special effects company Real SFX would be attending. But was this really necessary? Like, come on, you could have given it away and made a kid's dream come true, or at least blown it up for an actual scene in the show. Plus, I know for a fact they usually have stunt props that can be put back together, so going out of the way to destroy this one felt like a middle finger to the Paradigm, which it probably was. This drone transpired to be the Doctor Who live prop, originally the Orange Scientist, and it's unknown if any of the parts were salvaged and used for anything. In the comments section, many decided, you know what, I didn't actually mind the Paradigm Daleks. Shame they never appeared more in the show. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Whilst some of course delighted in its destruction and probably cackled as the flames danced around its collapsing body. But this to me was a metaphor for the end of the Paradigm's reign. For half a decade they'd caused controversy amongst the fandom, but nonetheless entertained the masses at events and undoubtedly left a massive impact on the show. The BBC had clearly invested a lot of money into a total of 19 props, but due to the initial mixed reception and, to be honest, a lack of narrative direction in the show itself, it was decided enough was enough. They were done. In 2016, Eagle Moss released a figurine of the Supreme Dalek. I bring this up as it was one of the few pieces of Paradigm merchandise released outside of Matt Smith's era. Upon its release, of course, fans complained and deemed it ugly. But here's the thing, this doesn't resemble the actual prop. The sculpt is very good, but it's painted all wrong and could indeed be considered ugly. But pictures of merchandise were often used as ammunition in arguments against the design. Oh, look how plasticky they look. Yeah, but that's a plastic toy. As much as I love the character options releases, the proportions aren't spot on either, so it's not really fair to use these in comparisons. In February of 2017, the Paradigm Daleks made their most bizarre appearance yet in the Lego Batman movie.
And British robots! Ask your nerd friends.
The plot of the film is that the worst villains from across the multiverse are all held in this one prison called the Phantom Zone. Batman's nemesis, the Joker, releases them and, lo and behold, the Daleks held there are none other than the 5 original Paradigm designs. As with the 5-ish Doctors, the Paradigm's imprisonment here feels like a meta explanation as to why they suddenly vanished from the main show. But no matter what happens, at least they'll remain in the Doctor Who experience. Permanently closed. Never mind. There was a total of 5 Paradigm props in the experience. All of these would have been put into storage, very carefully you'd imagine. And then, nothing. Peter Capaldi left, Stephen Moffat left, anyone associated with the creation of these Daleks were no longer there as the show changed hands. Bizarrely, this sequel to Doctor Who Legacy, titled Doctor Who Infinity, features the original Dalek Paradigm, marking the only time they've ever featured in a story with the 12th Doctor, despite Peter Capaldi having already left the role by this point. Stranger still, they're referred to as the Dalek Purity Squad and come in to police their bronze counterparts. Yet another interpretation of the Paradigm's purpose, but one that is hard to take seriously considering the game's questionable quality.
And there it was. The Daleks had finally come to police their own. And to my mind, it was long overdue.
Then, out of nowhere, in October of 2019, a video titled Exterminate Halloween Prank was released on the official Doctor Who YouTube channel. Such social media edginess reflects the state the show was in at the time, but most importantly, it showed us a Paradigm Dalek prop for the first time in 2 years. So yes, they had been kept, and this metallic strategist had been residing in the BBC lobby. Someone got in the Dalek and trundled towards any unsuspecting visitors, shouting exterminate.mp3. Which proves that not only is it instantly recognisable as a Dalek, but the public actually found it somewhat frightening. Most importantly though, the video suggested that the props were alive and well, so the BBC must have taken good care of them all. 3 years later, in 2022, 8 of the 19 Paradigm props suddenly appeared for sale at the prop store, having been gifted to them by the BBC, with proceeds going to children in need. It's important to note the horrible condition these props are now in since we last saw them, for seemingly no reason. The props were the original Eternal, now scratched and missing the end of its plunger, following its pristine condition for several years at the Doctor Who Experience, the live metallic strategist, the most complete prop of the lot, then the Supreme made for Asylum, which is in an awful state all of a sudden, and the metallic strategist and drone from the Experience were already weathered but are now missing appendages. The fact that this is the original Supreme Dalek prop is just devastating, with even more parts lost following its battering. The original metallic drone from Asylum is missing its head in addition to appendages, which is a complete mystery as it was last seen all in one piece. And finally, this was the original strategist that became the Stone Dalek. They've subsequently melted down into a charred mess. Why? As far as I'm aware, it didn't appear as a blown up Dalek on screen or at the Experience. So what would have been such a valuable prop being butchered like this is truly baffling. So if I ever needed confirmation that the Paradigm Daleks would never return to Doctor Who, this was it. Ever since their hyped up debut in 2010, when they took the world by storm, the Paradigm underwent an unsatisfying, drawn out death over the next decade. I think in going over their entire history, it's clear to me at least where things went wrong. Was the main problem their bright colours and hunchbacks? Arguably no. We were told all of these terrifying things about hidden weapons and Dalek hierarchy, but we saw none of it happen on screen. Presumably this was all originally planned, but scampered after the terrible backlash to the design. What we really needed was a big story around Series 6, showing us what the Paradigm were capable of and give people reason to fear them, which is basically what we got in City of the Daleks, a video game that most of the audience won't have played. Compare this to the RTD era, wherein each Dalek story was narratively connected to the next. The Cult of Skaro gave us an excellent taste of what more character-focused Daleks could be like, which is what I envisioned for the Paradigm. But when you look back on not only the design of Dalek, but their use as a whole throughout the Moffat era, nothing really happens. They're mostly cameos for show, with each appearance having little or no connection to the last. I adore Victory of the Daleks and the way it perfectly leads on from the last Dalek story of the RTD era, but the Paradigm it introduced, shown off like an Apple product, and then they bugger off into space. The concepts that Moffat and Gaddis teased behind the scenes were intriguing, whilst the many pieces of expanded media did a tremendous job of following through with some of these ideas. But at the end of the day, they're Daleks. You can blow them up at the end of the episode, but give the design and most importantly your ideas a fair crack of the whip first. Instead, the criticisms from the fandom clearly got to Moffat, meaning the new Dalek Paradigm began to crumble before it even got started. Despite this, the impact of these Daleks cannot be understated. Whether you were a fan of them or not, you can bet they dominated merchandise sales and the general public clearly adored them as much as ever. They're so unique to the early Matt Smith era that any appearance in an episode is charming to see. It makes the scenes and shots memorable at least, whereas I can't picture any recent ones of the Bronze Daleks, because they just all blur into one after a while. In a trailer for the Big Finish audio adventure series The 11th Doctor Chronicles in 2023, we saw a render of a red drone. It doesn't even feature in the story, but when people nostalgically reflect on that era, of course it's these Daleks that come to mind. Perhaps an audio story that expanded on these Daleks wouldn't be such a bad idea, as despite the lack of visuals, the unique voices given to each rank by Nick Briggs would distinguish them as characters. Something that was never truly explored. You couldn't make this up, but days after completing this video, the return of the Paradigm Daleks was announced for a Big Finish audio titled Victory of the Doctor, releasing in 2024. For the artwork, new digital models of the Paradigm were created by James Johnson, dubbed the Reborn variant with refined proportions. Whilst initially appearing off-model to someone who's seen so much of the original design, I can't deny that it's a pretty strong look that finishes what Asylum started by bringing the shape closer to that of an original Dalek, whilst giving the Scientist and Eternal metallic paint jobs for the first time. So despite the props no longer being with the BBC, we might finally get to at least hear a fully fledged Paradigm in action after all these years. As a child of the 2010s, this has been an enjoyable trip down memory lane with a hint of tragedy, rediscovering the history of the Daleks that time forgot.
We will return! We will return!
Thank you.